Welcome to this week's Endurance for Everyone podcast.
The following program is for entertainment purposes only. Though the hosts of this show are certified Ironman coaches, their attempts at long-course triathlons and endurance events should not be taken as an endorsement for you to do something stupid too. You should make your own bad decisions, then podcast about it. Now, let's start the show.
Hey, this is John Harris.
And this is Rob Bozovich.
And Endurance is for Everyone, and this is the Endurance for Everyone podcast. Hi, everyone. This is John, and before the show gets started, it's another Rob Bozovich file. This week, he's going to interview Mr. Luke Humphrey. Luke Humphrey is the author, or co-author, I should say, of the Hansons Marathon Method, which is something that Rob is currently in the middle of, being monitored by myself. Just a little bit about Luke. He began running back in the middle school and hasn't slowed down since. This is from his book, by the way, so I'm reading right out of it. After several all-state performances in high school, Luke ran for Central Michigan University from 1999 to 2004, where he was a member of several NCAA Division I top 25 cross-country teams, including a ninth place team in 2002. In the fall of 2004, Luke competed in his first marathon at the LaSalle Bank Chicago Marathon for the Hanson Brooks Distance Project. He ran a debut time of 2 hours, 18 minutes, and 46 seconds and was 18th overall. Since then, Luke has gone on to finish 11th in the 2006 Boston Marathon, 11th in the 2008 ING New York City Marathon, and 12th in the 2010 Bank of America Chicago Marathon, and has also qualified for 3 U.S. Olympic trials for the marathon in 2008, 2012, and 2016. He holds a personal best of 2 hours, 14 minutes, 38 seconds in the marathon, has a BAA in Exercise Science from Central Michigan University, and an MS in Exercise Science from Oakland University. Luke began Hanson's coaching services in May 2006 to help runners of all abilities reach their running goals. He and his wife, Nicole, have a daughter, Josephine, which was my grandmother's name, so that's kind of cool to see that. It's an old-fashioned Italian name. With that all being said, I've listened to the interview with Luke and between Luke and Rob, and actually is a very good episode. So I'm looking forward to you guys getting to hear it. So without further ado, take it away, Rob.
Okay, we have Luke here with us. Luke, how you doing?
I'm good. Thanks for having me, man.
Hey, I appreciate you coming on. You know, it's what the joke that we had kind of said the other time, just kind of teasing it out that we were going to have an interview coming on, was, hey, yeah, you know, like the guy that wrote the book, that guy, yeah, we're going to have him on. And guess what? You're that guy.
I'm the guy. Oh, well, I'm sorry to hurt your readership.
Well, it is an audio show, you know what I mean? So I don't know if it's going to hurt any readership whatsoever. So this is the best we can do for them. So,
Okay.
So yeah, I appreciate your time coming on with me today and giving me some, knowledge. And so what I had shared a couple of episodes ago and a little bit pre-roll with you there was how I came to your book, and I say your book, and that is the Hansons Marathon Method. And it's one of those deals, and I can't quite remember the year. Maybe it was 10 years ago, maybe it was 8 years ago. When I was getting into running, like we all do, I kind of, you jump in, subscription Runner's World, and it comes in, I read it cover to cover. And I remember hearing about this crazy plan. I mean, because at that time, for me to, I'm 270 pounds, and in order to, I can barely make it to the 13-minute mile to get to the mailbox out, in front of me type of deal. And
Right.
to see the volume and the everything that you guys had, it's like one of those, like you just filed away, like, yeah, that's just a whole other level of stuff. So to be, fast forward to today, yeah, I'm doing it. I'm following the plan, and it seems to be working extremely well. And for those who when I say don't know or don't remember, like what even intrigued me about it was a few years ago I set up my marathon PR the Pittsburgh Marathon, which is not a flat one. And I wasn't following your plan, but I was following something pretty similar to it. And that being said, is the plan was just a cheap offline, one where it was 4 days a week of running. At that time, I was on a run streak doing a mile a day. And I was, for some reason, leading into the marathon, I decided to do 3 miles a day, 5K actually. And, I went through the marathon and I got my PR and, could just be the day and the course and everything lining up. But it was some validation that this plan might be something that would work for me. Maybe not necessarily everybody because they had to be injury prone and so forth. But, I didn't bite it, jump into it just yet or anything. It took me a couple more years to actually go out, get the book, and kind of that is like I've had 3 or 4 friends of mine that every time we're talking about marathons, I bring it up saying, man, I want to try this. And one of my friends locally, like a year and a half ago, he went out, picked up the book, and after he had been injured this is how I met him, because he was then at much slower paces, and he goes out, follows the plan, and puts out and I don't know what his PR was previously, but he puts out like a mid 320s 330 marathon, and once again Pittsburgh, and so I'm like, okay, and he really liked it. As a matter of fact, he's doing the plan again for Pittsburgh this year, but he's scaled it back from the advanced to the, I'm gonna say, the beginner one. I'm currently following the advanced plan under the idea or guise of, if it's a little too much, then I could back it off later. Right. But thus far, and we'll talk later about, I've only had to miss one. I've only had to adjust one run, and it was a time constraint. Everything seems to be working for me. I just want to say, I kind of want to turn it over to you. So it's the Hansons Marathon Method. You are Luke Humphrey. So, right. But the byline, I guess, on the bottom, Luke Humphrey with Keith and Kevin Hanson. You guys are all in Chicago. I was kind of out on your website looking around, but when I say fill in some of the blanks for me and then just talk for a bit, because I just talked for 4 minutes, we'll let you go for as long as you'd like. Who are the Hansons? Did they develop the plan? Did you step in and like try to curate it into this? I mean, I know you guys do coaching services as well. How did it come to be? Like just what happened? Who poked who to make this thing happen?
Yeah, I mean, so we're out of the Detroit area in Michigan, and Kevin.
Oh, I'm sorry, I thought it was Chicago. I apologize.
Oh no. So Kevin and Keith, they're brothers, and they started Hansons Running Shop here locally in the Metro Detroit area. I want to say 1991 they opened.
Okay.
And so they had the stores, and then in the book schedules that are in the book have been around since right around then. So they've been around a long time.
Okay.
And they basically would do clinics for people running the Detroit Marathon.
Free Press Marathon, if I'm correct?
Well, I'm sorry?
Is it the Detroit Free Press Marathon?
Yeah, yep, still the Free Press Marathon. And so they would just train people locally for that. And then in 1998, they began the Hansons Brooks, it was just the Hansons Distance Project at that time. So they were basically saying, we don't like the state of where U.S. distance running is at from a professional standpoint. We're going to start a team. So they did that, and then that's where it kind of became popular in Runner's World and things like that over the years. But so I joined the elite program in August of 2004, and ran the Chicago Marathon right away. It was my first race, pretty much my first race here with the team, and then really went from there. But so basically the schedules have been around a long time, and then the program really kind of made Kevin and Keith kind of some notoriety nationally. And then so I'm just, as far as like my association with them, I was just they're my coach. They're still my coach today with the elite program. And then I think they, their kids were starting to get a little older, and I think they want to spend more time. So they were kind of pushing me to kind of start taking over the clinics a little bit for the fall marathon. And I I was always reluctant because when I first came here, I was kind of finishing my master's degree in exercise phys. And so in 2006, I finished my master's, and essentially I defended my thesis, ran Boston, and started Hansons coaching services all within about 3 weeks in April.
Like it's good not to put too much on your plate at once.
Right. So between that 3 weeks of mid-April to early May, we did that. And so, because basically I started doing the clinics for him the year before, and then people were kind of asking me, hey, do you want to coach me individually? Next thing you know, you're getting a few more people, and then all of a sudden, I talked to Kevin and Keith, and they're like, yeah, go for it. So with their blessing, they basically let me start Hansons Coaching Services, which was before the book by far. So you go schedule, then Hansons Coaching for recreational runners, and then the book. But honestly, everything kind of fell into my lap. I was actually on a plane with Keith Hanson. We were going to a race, and he'd gotten an email from this Casey Blaine at VeloPress out in Boulder, and he said, hey, we're bouncing around ideas for new books. We're mostly triathlon and cycling, but we want to start getting into the running world, and nobody's done a book on Hansons. And so they said, you want to do a book? And Keith's like, I own 4 stores. I have a family. I'm coaching you guys. I don't have time to write a book. Hey, Luke, do you want to write the book? Sure, I'll write the book. So honestly, I was at the right place at the right time for that. And then, so that was, I think the first edition came out in 2011. And then we did the half marathon book a couple years later. And then now the second edition is out. And then I'm actually working on another book. The manuscript's at VeloPress right now, and they're looking over everything and finalizing it. But we're doing another marathon book for first-time marathoners too. So it's gone far beyond what I ever thought it would. I mean, I was running professionally, and I was working in cardiology at one of the local hospitals here, and I was able to quit the hospital where I was making pretty good money to just coach and write books. So I mean, I've definitely been very, very fortunate with things.
Definitely living the dream, it sounds like. That's awesome. So then you're saying, I wrote down a couple of dates and a couple of little random things here, which answers some questions that I was going to ask, but I'll ask and then we can interject too. So you're saying they opened the store back whenever it was in the 90s, and then 04 about when you came along. So did they then, is this one of the things they then completely came up with it, and was it something that they were like guinea pigging them, N1 experiment themselves on, or was it like something that's been in the running world prior that they've just brought to light? I mean, what are we looking at with that?
Well, I mean, yeah, they definitely put the whole program together, and I mean, I know Kevin's wife used it, Kevin used it, Keith used it. The same philosophy is in our elite training. It's just different workouts, but the overall philosophy is exactly the same. And, so it's, and then you can just go to the, the few thousand people that used it here locally and were successful at Detroit. So yeah, I mean, they tweaked it along the way, but, it's probably been in its vital state for, probably 20 years. But yeah, I mean, when people look at us, they're like, oh, you're the 16-mile long run, people, and then if people don't know the whole story, they just assume that it's kind of a gimmick. But I don't think when people really dive into the structure of the program, it starts making a lot more sense to people, because that's one of the biggest knocks that I hear other coaches say on when they're doing podcasts and stuff, like, oh, if you're only running 16 miles, you're not preparing for the marathon. But well, neither is running, 20 miles a week and 30 miles a week and 20 of it coming from one run a week. I mean, that's not really preparing you for much more than surviving a marathon, and that's not necessarily our goal. And that was never Kevin and Keith's goal, I don't think, to just get people ready to have a miserable experience in the marathon, and just recognize, yeah, you can train hard, but you need to keep everything in perspective. And I think they've done, an amazing job with that. And it's a very balanced program, especially when you compare to some of the other stuff that's out there, where it's like, now I'm seeing this stuff with this on Facebook. This lady's advertising like a 9-mile marathon program like what in the world, but it's like everybody's
that
got
doesn't even
something.
sound like
It doesn't even
reasonable. And
sound
I guess,
enjoyable. Yeah, your training is going to be easy, but you're going to be miserable after if you even make it through the race. But so yeah, I mean, but Kevin and Keith have done a great job with it, and I, honestly, I am just a steward of the program and a spokesperson for it. So that's really my main role. And I think, when they wanted me, when they said write the book, and even before that, they really pushed me into starting the coaching business. They really wanted, they were really proactive with that, and they said, you can have a career with this if you really wanted to. And it's hard when you're in a stable job at a hospital, and you are making pretty decent money for how much where you're at, and to take that step out of there and say, okay, I'm going to do this coaching and just see what happens was pretty big. But they had the program, they knew what to do, and I knew the science behind what they were doing. So that's where I stepped in. I was just able to explain, well, this is why it works physiologically, and go through that, where they just said, we know this works because it's worked for, hundreds of thousands of people for the last, 20 years. So right, they knew it worked, and I could explain why it did.
Cool. One of the things, excuse me, I didn't mean to cough in your ear there. You had said, hey, people know us as the 16-mile long run. I guess the first couple plans I've done were somewhere between like an 18 and a 20-mile long run, and that's I'm getting smaller now, but once again, I'm still over 200 pounds. And when I was training previously at 220, 240, 260, that's a long time to be out there, especially when I'm saying now, and I told you, we try to be a very inclusive group. I don't want anyone sitting back and thinking, because we can get into it, because you guys have, the book has a just finished plan, and it has a beginner, I guess, I believe a middle and an advanced. And so but even that being said, looking at your advanced plan, I'm trying to flip back to it here, I'm looking at and we'll get into what this means in a second, the strength workouts. You have everything on the chart from a marathon goal time that says 2:28 all the way up to a 5:01. So just because somebody's doing the advanced plan doesn't necessarily indicate or dictate that they're going to be a 6-minute mile, or myself, my tempo runs are like an 8:15, because you can scale that all the way up to what is appropriate. But exactly. I think what it was intriguing to me, like you said about the 16-mile long run, is, hey, even if you're a slower 13-15 minute miler, just I'm making that time up, it means you're going to be out there for less time on that one run, but you are going to be out there more runs per week. I mean, your workout plan, and when I say I'm not exactly giving anything away out of the book, because you also have it on your website as well. I went out and looked at it, and that was going to be one of my questions, and kind of answered, we'll get there. It's basically a 6-day-a-week workout for the advanced. The other plans are going to have less, but with Wednesdays being your off days, you guys have what you call, and I'm pulling, get your terminology, your SOS, your something of substances. That's your Tuesday, Thursday, the interval, strength, speed type of workouts, and tempo. On Tuesdays, Thursdays are tempo. I mean, this morning was 10-mile tempo for me, which is 1.5 warm up, 7-mile tempo pace, and 1.5 cool down. That used to, in the old plans, when I say the old plans, whenever I was only running 4 days a week, there were days that I'd go do my long run, my longest run of my life. I went out and did 12 miles today, and it wiped me out the rest of the day. I couldn't move, and just the consistency that I find that the first couple weeks were very tiring, but I'm feeling good. I mean, I went and did 10 miles this morning, and then went to work, and here I am now. You know what I mean? Right. And just sitting around. I'm not in a laborious job. I'm not in a factory or anything, but I'm not anywhere near as painful or sore. Mm-hmm. And I don't remember if this is in the book or was in one of the interviews, like in Runner's World or whatnot. I believe the quote, and how I explain your plan using your words. You're not training somebody to run the first 16 miles of the marathon. You're training them to run the last 16. When you're tired, when you're already, I don't want to say at wit's end, but that's kind of the point of what's happening. And I do remember somewhere in your book, that's one of the topics you cover is, and you said you know the science behind it. You guys build this plan on cumulative fatigue versus, and the other thing that the chapter or the part I'm talking about says cumulative fatigue versus overtraining. So what are you guys looking at in the plan or in the science that works that gets you to this tired state that helps you train but without being injured?
Right. So I mean, there's a lot going on there, but yeah, for one, I think most people when they train, and I've noticed this a lot in our Facebook community, where people don't, and I want to be careful because it's not for lack of intelligence. I think it's just lack of knowing what's better for them.
I always say this, and I will put myself on the sword for you there, and I even say it in our group, and I say I'm coming from a place of ignorance, not in the I want to offend somebody, but in the I don't know category.
Right, and
Yep.
I see that a lot, but what I see, especially with more beginning runners, and even more advanced runners, but it's almost like every run has to be their best. So one of the things I look at is teaching them why it's okay to run on your easy day, why that should be, 1 to 2 minutes slower than your marathon pace, because you're training, but you're also recovering at the same time. And so when people get kind of out of control with their training, is they basically, especially early on when it's easier to get a little out of control, you run easier or you run harder on your easier runs, and then you start cheating down your workouts, like say you have a 4-mile tempo run early in the season, so 4 miles at your marathon pace, and then say that's 9 minutes per mile. People run 8:45, 8:30s for that, and it's just too fast. So part of it's an education thing. We're like, okay, understand what the goal is for each day and stick to that goal. And so you're going to get tired, but you're not going to dig that hole so deep that by the time you get to 6 weeks out from your marathon, you're so fatigued that you're just completely fried. And that's one of the biggest things with that. And that's how cumulative fatigue works, is being able to train while tired, but to do that, you have to run easy on easy days so you can make the workouts what they need to be. But when you're too aggressive, I think that's when people really get into big trouble there. But and that's honestly one of the biggest things I see across the board, is people just think if fast is good, faster is better, and it's not the case. So it's really more, I guess, an educational standpoint from me, as far as, okay, can I show this runner why they should be doing it this way, and then when they do get it, and a lot of times it's trial and error, but then they do very, very well with the program. But I would say when people aren't successful with the program, it's not so much volume, it's running too fast on a regular, too consistent of a basis. So and I know that wasn't quite what you were asking, but I think that's where you kind of got to start with that. And then you can build on top of that. So yeah.
Well, and that being said, I won't read it, or mention the names. You wouldn't have any idea of this, but literally a hour ago, somebody in our Facebook group was going through a very similar what you had just said about if fast is good, faster is better, hard is good, harder is better type of deal. And John, my co-host, was kind of saying, no, you need to maybe need to change this a little bit. You know what I mean? Mm-hmm. And to hear that repeated from you as well, is a very, very good thing. I'm trying to pull up when I say my numbers, what I did is but previously I wrote down, so I'm not always going back and forth through the book trying to find it. I wrote down what some of my paces, should be at. And as an example, when I just have it wrote down based off of your stuff, and I'm targeting my goal is sub 4. But just, what do I want to do? Train for a 3:58 and then something unpredicted come up? No. So I took what I thought I might be able to do. I'm trying to do all of my stuff based on a 3:45 finish. And then basing that, once again, I just wrote this down from page 92, 93 of the book, what my paces should be. My recovery should be an 11. My easy A should be a 10:21. My easy B a 9:39. Moderate aerobic long run 9:18. Tempo 8:35. Strength 8:24, 10K, 5K, whatever. Okay. So that being said, is today, and I'm probably going personally, and you can scold me, a little too fast on some of when I say my easy runs. But hey, I am in week 6 now, and I'm running injury free, and I'm able to keep it consistent. I'm hitting the strength workouts, the speed workouts, as prescribed, hitting those numbers where they should be, and my easy paces, like according to that, my easy pace, should be, 9:30 to 10:30, and I've been keeping them mostly almost at about an 8:45, maybe to 9:20. So a little bit faster on that than I guess I should be. And that said, I've only had 2 runs, my long run on this past Sunday and my tempo run today, that when I say fell off pace, but from being, up there in Michigan, I'm over here in central Pennsylvania, I did 12 miles in 2 inches of snow. So when I'm supposed to be at a 9:30 and I'm at I was about a minute off pace, about a 10:30 I should say. And then the same thing, my tempo run today, my middle tempo, I was about 20 seconds high on the entire average. And when I go back and look, it's because my flats, downhills, and where the roads were clear was fine, but I'm running, uphill in slushy snow. There's only so much you can do safely on something like that. So,
and that's the biggest thing people do is you see that a lot right now. Like I'm seeing a lot of Achilles and calf issues because people are just trying to force the issue on really any run, and it's hard. I mean, you're sliding, they're sliding around. They have crappy footing. It's cold, and it's just you're wearing 10 pounds extra of clothes. I mean, those things add up, and it always kind of boggles my mind when people are like, oh, it's so bad that I can't hit my paces. But then you look outside and you're like, well, yeah, I mean,
what did you expect?
You got like I'm looking in my parking lot right now and it's like a half inch of ice. Like I bust my butt walking out to my car tonight, so it's like, you can't expect things like if things aren't perfect outside, you can't expect training to go perfect. You have to kind of go a little bit by effort and use a little bit of common sense and say, okay, I know this feels hard, so I'm getting the effort that I need to get in, and so you see that a lot. So you see that with the winter, and then in the summer it's the other way with the heat. Like, oh my gosh, it was 85 and I couldn't hit my paces, and like, well, no, you're not adapted to that part. You gotta take it with a grain of salt. So
yeah, and it's funny because John, my co-host, he's my coach as well, and he forgets some of that stuff sometimes. He's getting better now, but he puts down these previously these long runs, these long rides, and so forth, swims for me, which swims aren't affected when I'm doing my triathlon training by weather. But he's in Florida, Tampa, you know what I mean? So he doesn't realize that, like, this morning was, it was, do I want to do a 10 miler on the treadmill, or do I want to go outside and it's 20 degrees? I mean, those are the 2 options. Which one is going to suck less? So I just, I chose outside. I threw my trail shoes on and I went just straight up the center of the street. You know what I mean? I picked where there wouldn't be traffic, and I just went from there, But yeah, so coming around on part of it here, I was going to ask, so you're saying the stuff in the book then is the original, and the reason why I asked that, and it's a funny story, so you'll get it, a couple weeks ago, last week, I guess it was, last Friday night's run, I was, I went out for the Friday easy 6 or whatever it's supposed to be on easy 6. That said, is I went through just double checking because I got the one offline too, and then I was just I thought John had messed up one or two of my things, so I went through and made these, I'm using air quotes, corrections to my training plan, because I put it all on my calendar, in Outlook, and he had 6 on Training Peaks. I don't know if you use that or not, and I had it as an 8-miler. So I go out and do 8 miles, and then got stuck on the wrong side of the river, and it ended up 8 turned into 9.3 just so I can get back to my house. So, to me, I'm like, okay, I went over. It was a mile, 0.3 over. I just kind of eased the pace back so I wasn't going to hurt myself. And then he said, you did like a 5K extra what you're supposed to do. And I'm like, no, go check the plan. Well, that's it. I went and checked. There are about 8 differences between the online plan and the in-the-book plan. So would you recommend that I continue to do it as it is in the book, or were these changes, so these changes online are the more, the newer ones, and that's what I'm assuming you guys would want to do? And some of them are just, you guys have a ladder in the book, and then instead of a ladder for a strength run, you have a 3 times 1 mile thing. And a couple of the other ones are you change a 6 to an 8. One of them was there was an 8 and a 10 mile, and you flip-flop them, and that's like week 6 actually. That's would be this weekend. So instead of the book calls for 6, 10, 8, and you guys online have it as 6, 8, 10. Like building up. So is it better to follow that one then, since it's the newer information?
I'm kind of laughing simply because I get this a lot, and in all honesty, it's because it doesn't matter.
Okay.
It's one of those things where people say that the schedule is too rigid, so purposely put stuff in there to get their minds whirling, because it really, on a speed day, your purpose is 3 miles worth of work at 10K pace.
Yep.
Tempos are marathon pace. Strength is 10 seconds faster than marathon pace. And then if you get those things in, you're doing well. It doesn't really matter how it's done. It just needs to be done. I actually answered this question on our Facebook group last week, and they were just, literally, I could just sense smoke coming out of these people's ears, because it was so like, but the book says. I go, you guys should come up here for a summer and go to a Tuesday, because they were talking about the structure of the book. I go, the reason why speed is on Tuesdays is because that's when we did speed work in Dodge Park on Tuesday evenings. Wednesdays are off because that's when we did clinics at one of the stores. Thursdays were tempo runs because that's when we did the Thursday night group run at our Royal Oak store. And then Sundays were always long runs because that's when we were partnered with kind of the Stony Creek Running Club, and they would do a rotating site every Sunday, and we would just do the long run with their group. So that's why the schedule is the way it is. It was to accompany, functions around the store basically. And, so it was just amusing. But, and then if you go to those Tuesday night speed runs, I tell you, Keith looks at the schedule, and he knows the schedule by the back of his hand. And he'd be like, nah, we're not doing that today. And he'll be like, hottest day of the year? Okay, we're doing 3 by mile today. and that's, you'll just show up and you'll get a sheet of paper. This is the workout. These are paces, and off you go. So yeah, people tend to overthink it quite a bit. And ultimately, work is work. So if you're getting the amount of work we're asking for at the pace we're asking for, that's all you can really hope for. I tend to set it up a little differently because just knowing kind of human nature. So I know 400s are typically easy workouts to hit, right? You can always run hard for a quarter mile, and most people can hit those okay. And then I just like to gradually pick that up. So that's really why I just go 4, 6, 8K, 12 ladder, mile, and sometimes I took the ladder out because it wouldn't fit in the box on the PDF. So I'm like, okay, well, we'll just take it out. It doesn't really matter. You just need three miles worth of speed. So people like that workout, and I have no problem people doing it. And they can do it, insert it wherever they want, especially in the advanced program where I think you have a couple weeks of where you can kind of can freestyle, because you'll go through all the workouts more than once. And if there's a certain workout you like, just do those. Do what's going to build your confidence, and before you transition into the strength stuff of the schedule. So yeah, people get hung up on that, and I think I understand it, but it doesn't. It's just work. Like I said, work is work, and as long as you're getting what you're asked to do, and as far as paces and amount of work, then it doesn't particularly matter.
I'm dumbfounded, and suddenly, like, it's one of those, like, lightning strikes and the angels are singing, because I've been looking, and this is a digression, but you'll see where it comes around to. My co-host John and I, we talked about the one in a different book, Triathlon 2.0, I think, and it's all about analyzing training peaks, and they talk about, like, the yellow line, the pink line, the this, the that, or whatever, but then the book's in black and white, so you can't, like, they show you this chart, and I'm like, and I couldn't see it, and I'm like, oh, maybe I'm half colorblind. So I've been looking at your book now for the last 6 months, and I've seen where you have speed workouts, and I've seen where you have strength workouts, but I never saw, like, I'm just saying right now, I'm just using week 6 as the example because that's where the word speed is. So it looks like you guys have speed workouts weeks 2 through 10, and then they change to strength workouts 11 through 18. So you switch over partway through, and that's where it's speed. I'm sitting here, I've been looking at that, and that was one of my questions to ask, or what's the difference between the speed and the strength? Because I'm looking at the book, and it looks like the same color gray to me, but it's just after week 10 they switch to strength. Huh.
Yeah, so speed's always going to be 3 miles worth of work. And we do that early in the segment for a couple of reasons. One, going back to when this plan originally was made up, if you were training for a fall marathon, I'm sorry?
I said that's probably what you could fit in the evening.
It was what you could fit in the evening, and it was in the summer, so a lot of people were running, local races and stuff during the summer. So we could get them to do speed work, and it would help them eventually for the marathon. But then they could also do their summer racing series if they really were doing something like that. And then you switch over to, and then you do it early in the segment too, because as you get closer to the race, you want all of your work to be as close to race simulating as possible, right? So it doesn't necessarily make sense to do a bunch of work at 5K pace when you're going to be running 8 times longer than that, So you're working a completely different energy system. So what we do is you put the speed, because we really want to keep balance too. We don't want to ever stray too far away from one aspect of training. So we want to keep speed in there, but it fits better in the beginning. And then the last 6-8 weeks, you transition over to strength, which is much more marathon specific, but it's just working a different energy system. So you're most like where speed is, you're going to be above lactate threshold or maximal lactate steady state, basically the point of no return. You can't, if you run, you're only gonna be able to run at that pace for a limited amount of time before you get the lactic burn. That's really what speed work is all about, and you just keep it shorter. And then the strength is basically twice the volume. So you move from 3 miles to 6 miles, you just slow it down a little bit, and you give them less recovery. And what you're doing there is you're actually working the body's ability to tolerate moderate amount of lactic acid. So where speed work, you're basically working on producing a lot of lactic acid and being able to clear a lot of lactic acid out. The strength is more about tolerating moderate amounts of lactic acid for longer periods of time. And so you're hitting essentially the same threshold, but one you're hitting it from the top and one you're hitting it from the bottom. And that's where you switch over from. That's when you make that switch. And then that bottom part is where it's really much more marathon specific. Because you think about the marathon, if you're building up lactic acid, then you're running too hard. But you want to be able to tolerate being uncomfortable for long periods of time. So that's when it makes the most sense for that.
Fantastic. Very good explanation. Like you've done this once or twice before, right? So a couple of other questions, and just random asides, and then we can continue more and more. But I don't want to keep digging farther into paces and times and all that stuff. Let's try to keep it general, because I as I told you, hey, our group is really inclusive, and ultimately, I'd like people to walk away from this saying, hey, what the heck? I wouldn't mind trying that. You know what I mean?
Yeah,
Try
buy
their
the
first
book.
marathon and get out there and do that.
Yeah.
So a couple questions people would put out for me, and that is, this book, at least I should say the book, the plan, what I'm looking at here is, once again, the advanced, there's the other variations on it, and I'll jump back to it. But the advanced plan has 6 days a week of running. It has Wednesday off. You just told us why we have Wednesdays off. Thank you. So the other plans, like I'm even looking at the beginner program, it appears to be the same. It's just,
Right.
I want to say lesser work. Wednesdays are off. But you guys, unlike some other plans that are out there, you have, when I say you have no cross training, some of your plans say just straight out say rest, and some of them say rest or cross train.
Right.
So, my question would be threefold, and everyone says, a lot of the other plans you see, and I guess when I go to your just finished plan, you do have, 2 days a week now that are rest or cross train. Looks like Monday, Wednesday. Why the lack of cross training out there, and or when can somebody do it?
Well, I mean, the choice is always up to the person, but I'm just trying to find the just finished program here. So
I'm sorry.
basically, no, I know you're good. But
page 112 of your book.
So I think
second edition.
So as far as cross training goes, so I'll go to the just finish. So I actually made the just finish plan afterwards, specifically for the second edition, and it was mainly just to give people who were really intimidated from the beginner and advanced plan, because truth be told, the beginner plan is probably as aggressive as most advanced plans that you can find out there, Runner's World and stuff like that. It's a tough program, but you're running a tough race, right? You're running 26 miles, so you want to be as prepared as possible. So the just finish was really more like, I had been doing some work with the American Cancer Society for their programs, and there were some people there. I mean, they were just simply there to raise money for charity, and they did not ever have any intentions of being runners. So I'm like, okay, well, what can we do for them? What's their biggest thing? Like, workouts are their biggest, the SOS are their biggest, factors in the intimidation. So I basically just took the beginner plan, took out the SOS days, and said, okay, just focus on getting runs in on a consistent basis and building your overall mileage. And that will be enough to run a 5-hour marathon or run a 6-hour marathon, if that's, because a lot of those people, that's all they were ever planning on doing. They just wanted to cover the ground, right? They didn't really care about how fast they were going to run. So as far as cross training goes, yes, if I have a choice to give somebody, I'm always going to tell them to run. I think that's the most marathon specific. I think that when most people have problems with running mileage, it's what we talked about before, where they just ran too hard all the time and they just burnt themselves out, or they just got into a situation where they got an overuse injury because they just weren't allowing themselves to recover properly between runs. And recovery doesn't mean taking every other day off to recover from the day before. If you're running the right paces, you can run and recover at the same time. And that goes back to what I was talking about. That's the huge educational component on my part that I have to do a good job of pushing forward. But given that, if you have somebody who, let's say, they got a program from Runner's World, one of the free program or something, and it literally was like 30 miles a week, and that was a lot for them, then I see the value in using cross training as a bridge, right? So if they're used to running 3 days a week and not really doing anything else, then I would use cross training as the first step into getting them to run 4 or 5 days, right? I would use cross training as to add, if they're running 3 days a week, I'd try to add 2 days of cross training just to get them to do something of physical activity, aerobic based, cardiovascular based, and then we can gradually phase out one of those days for another short day of running, and then gradually phase out the other day and then all of a sudden they're running 5 days a week. It might only be 30 minutes at a time, but we can get them to run. It's like you said, when you're running, a 5K every day, if we could get them to do that like 4 or 5 times a day, then we can start building on top of that, right? We can start building on volume.
I'm not correcting you on anything. You've been saying you just said 4 or 5 times a day. For a beginner, I believe you mean per week.
Per week. Sorry.
Okay.
So
we don't want people to hang up or get off right there.
So four. If I can get somebody to run 4 or 5 times a week, then they have the main foundation laid, and then from there they can add on and start adding the other components. Like they could start adding the long run. So my thing is always build volume first and then add the intensity. And I think a lot of times what people will do is they'll just add a bunch of intensity. They can't recover from it. And when they try to add volume, they're already fried. Or they'll add both at the same time and they just get fried. So they just get, they'll get either overtrained, they'll start hating it, they'll get hurt, they'll get sick, or a combination of those things. And then it's just, then it's a big turn off to the sport, right? They just don't want to, why would you want to keep going through that if it's that difficult? So that's usually how I approach getting people to gradually add more and more volume to what they think they're capable of doing. And it's actually amazing. Like I've seen people that I've worked with individually literally go from running 20 miles a week and thinking that was the most that they could ever do. I'm thinking one guy right now, Gil, he's, when he first came on, he was literally running, he's an Air Force guy, and he was, he lifted more weights than he ran. And then he's like, I just want to run a half marathon. And now he's running, the guy averages, right now he's ramping up for London, and he's running 40, 50 miles a week. And he's like, well, you said I ran 10 miles a day, and then I went to work and I felt fine, so you can definitely do a lot more than you think you can. It's just a matter of, one, not just seeing where you're at and where you want to be and thinking, oh my gosh, there's no way that's going to happen. And two, just gradually making those steps forward. Because if you make the smaller steps sooner, you're actually going to get to the end goal a lot faster. Because every time you get hurt and you have to take time off, you just set yourself back. So it's one of those 2 steps forward, 1 step back. And if you can just make small steps forward all the time, you're going to get there faster than what you would have otherwise.
Yeah, makes sense. Now, and I'll ask, 'cause I have somebody had asked me, and then I told you I was going to ask it. And so the question arises, and I'll say it this way: I'm currently doing 6 days a week, obviously following the plan. I got a 10.5-month-old at home and a business to run, so there's only so many hours in the day. So one of my friends wants me to go to spin class, and I was going prior to starting running, and then they're like, hey, we miss you in spin. I'm like, well, you're going to miss me until at least May. And they're like, well, you can add it on. I'm not adding another one, because another hour will lead to divorce. But that being said, spin for me was generally Friday mornings. Okay. And it does get into a little bit more. And obviously you had said, hey, I can do what I want. You're not holding me down or making me do this, but I do want to run my best marathon. So I want to do as much of these as close to plan as possible. You know what I mean? That being said, at some point, would it be okay? Because once again, Fridays are easy days. It's about an hour worth of volume, and cycling and running are fairly close there. So it would be a come off of a tempo day. Would it be okay at some point to, when I say start doing that, and I'm not asking you, I'm not forcing you into a yes or a no. I will ask you I'm not trying to guide you into which way to steer me here. Just give me your honest opinion. The other part of that is, like I said, my race is going to be first weekend of May, and a second goal for me then is, like I said, I'm in the triathlons, and come a couple weeks later in May, heading into June, it's peaked when I say triathlon season. I want to go out and win my age group. It sounds bold to say it, but I'm usually number 1 or number 2 in some of the races that I'm looking at. Winning my age group qualifies me for USAT Nationals. It's in Cleveland this year, and I want to go, and that's in August. So I need to pick a May-June race that I need to win my age group, which is going to require some time in the saddle. Would it be okay to make the swap, do it the whole time, do it later, or do you think, hey, it's just going to be the amount of run volume that I'm going to have in me is going to be enough to carry me into a strong start. And that's, once again, if my race isn't until mid-June, that's a month and a half to get swim and cycle ready.
Right.
Thoughts?
Yeah, and I honestly, like, my wife was a triathlete before we got married with kids, and now she's just running. But she always just told me you can just buy speed. So my suggestion, Rob, is just buy a faster bike. No, I'm just kidding. I'm just kidding. So,
feel free to send one out, buddy. I'll ride it.
There's one in my basement that sat there for 5 years. I'll go sell it. No, but seriously, I know, and I coach a few people, but I'm always upfront with them. Like, I know nothing about the triathlon. I don't know anything about swimming. I know nothing about cycling. So I will say, what I usually tell them is, and some of them have other coaches too, so they'll have somebody who will guide them on the bike and in the swim stuff. But I'll just kind of coordinate with them sometimes, like when's the best place to do bricks or whatever, getting run in long run, whatever we need to do when is it. But to do that on my own, I wouldn't have any idea where to strategically place those workouts. But yeah, I think with the cross training thing, as far as like with the spin example, I think you have to be careful, because what I'm seeing locally, things like Orange Theory Fitness has just exploded here, and there's a million of them around, and people love it, and it's fine. But like on their model, and I don't, spin I think probably gets fairly intensive, but with Orange Theory Fitness, it was like you have to wear a heart rate monitor and then be in your zone, and it's basically a competition, right? And so if the goal of the day is an easy day, and you swap out the easy day for essentially another intense day, then it defeats the purpose, right? Then you're just digging that hole further than what we would if we would have just put in 45 minutes of easy running. So you have to be careful from that stance. The cross training has to fit the goal of the day, and that's where I think people get into a little bit of trouble. So like with a spin, like if it's something where you're going to be really ripping it towards the end, that really might not make sense right now. But I could see, if you're training for a triathlon, taking those Wednesdays and either going for a swim or going in a bike, just so you stay proficient in there, do your race, and then that last 6 weeks you put a lot more. You can, since you've already established a huge base of fitness with a run from a running standpoint, then that last 6 weeks you can just kind of go back and focus on the other two aspects, I would think. But it's tough. It's tough, and it's really one of those things where it's hard to train for both at the same. It's really hard to train for both at the same time and be really good. So like if you're like, so I get, what I'll see a lot of times is somebody will want to qualify for Boston, but then they also want to do an Ironman, like a month later, 2 weeks later.
Yeah.
And to me, that's really tough. You almost have to pick which one you want to be more successful at. So qualifying for Boston's your priority, make that your priority, and then just go do the triathlon after that and just do what you can. Or if it's the other way around, if you want to just do the marathon, it's hard to put that many eggs in one basket and have it work out appropriately, especially the more competitive you get. For more recreational, your strength in the running is going to be enough to give you a lot of what you need across the board, right?
Yeah.
But like as I mean, the better you get at something, the more defined the training has to be, and when you get to that point, it makes it tough to do, because in theory it sounds like, well, they're both big time endurance events, but in reality, you're choosing whether to be okay at 3 sports or good at one, and it's a tough call.
Yeah, no, that's really good points. You can't serve too many masters at one point. And this year is, I guess, is an example of me just wanting maybe a little bit too much of everything, because last year I'd set the goal that I wanted to do this qualify and go do triathlon nationals. Then like I said, I got into the Pittsburgh Marathon, which I've switched my entry to. I'm not switched the entry, I should say. I'm switching. I'm going to be doing the Waco in early May. And at the end of the season, when I say end of the year, October, I got into the Chicago, marathon through the lottery. So really, it would probably be best for me to sit back and when I say sit back, just focus on the marathons. But I really like riding my bike and I like swimming. So I know I'm going to be out there doing triathlon in the summer, and I'm just hoping that some of my natural fitness, I'm using air quotes when I say it that way. Mm-hmm. Never been a swimmer, never been a cyclist, but I've been trying to get better and better through the years, hoping that some of that will just carry me through to meet some of the goals that I need. You said, though, you're not into tri, your wife was. But you did say you did Chicago in the past. Any tips, tricks? Like, what can I expect? I mean, I've been to the city a couple of times, but obviously I've never. I've ran out there, but I've never ran the marathon out there. So, What are we looking at? What? When's the last time you did it? What? You're obviously, I believe, much faster than me. Like, elite programs and all that type of stuff. So it's going to be a little different for me on race day than you, but what can I expect?
Yeah, it's it's a great race for sure. I've run Chicago a number of times. Probably two or three of my fastest times are out there. So I've run 2:15 out there 2 or 3 times throughout the last decade and a half. But I actually ran last fall.
Did you just shake your head at me trying to I hope I'm going to break 4 because that's twice where you're at?
Well, no, I mean, it was my job for a long time, so I probably better be halfway decent at it. Most of the people I work with are in the 3.5 to 4.5 hour range. So I think that's where a lot of people are at. So. So for me, like you said, it was a little different just because, I'm at the front of the line there, I guess. And you definitely, it can get a little lonely for me because I'm kind of an in-betweener, like from being truly world class and then being like a local elite local level elite. And so you kind of get out there in no man's land a little bit, but the course is flat for sure. The only, hill you have is the bridge on Roosevelt before you make the left-hand turn to go to the finish line. But so at 26 miles, you have your first hill, and then but it's one of those things where like if you were to go out there today, like, oh, this isn't even a hill, but after 26 miles, it's a hill.
It's significant, yeah, yep.
Yeah, right. So. So I think with you, like in that 3:45 to 4 range, I mean, you'll have a million people to be running with. It's always very, very, very not crowd. Well, there's 40,000 people that are running, but yeah, you'll have people around you, which is good. Crowd support is amazing. I would say the biggest thing is don't get too caught up the first 5-6 miles, because you're right in the heart of downtown there, and it's loud, and people are screaming at you, and the signs are going, and it's a crazy atmosphere for sure, and it can be very easy to get caught up in that and go too fast, and you got to kind of keep the emotions in check there and kind of focus on your pace. So that's the big thing. But then you get out of the backside, you get out towards the south side of Chicago, and it's not as there's not as much crowd there. But then you come back in through like the Mexican Village and then Chinatown, and then I always call it Kaminsky Park, but it's not Kaminsky Park anymore. But where the White Sox play, you go right by there, and it's great. I mean, it's a great course. You see a lot of stuff. You run up along the lake shore for a few miles and go through those neighborhoods. So I love it. I love that race. I've done it probably 5 or 6 times, and it's always been fun. Just the whole atmosphere there is fun, and it's definitely a fast course. I think some people get a little claustrophobic with as many people as there, but the difference between like Boston has less people in it, but it also has very narrow roads. Whereas Chicago, you have 40,000 people, but you're on 5-lane roads the whole time too, so you're definitely able to spread out a little bit more.
So when I say I've done them all and everything in between, I'm not anywhere near as number of marathons nor as accomplished as you. But my first marathon was Erie, Pennsylvania, up on Presque Isle, dead flat, 2 loops around it up there, 2,000 people.
Yeah.
I've done. You heard me. I did Toledo Marathon. I've done Pittsburgh. I've done Nashville Marine Corps. Biggest by far was New York City Marathon. Got into the lottery. Well, I shouldn't say I got rejected 3 times and got in, and it was the year following the year it was canceled. So it was the biggest. It may have been bigger now since, but I mean 50,000 some runners. You know what I mean? So you talk about the big race and the hype. Oh, I totally get it. I mean, that first mile of that race is up the bridge and then back down the other side. And, you bob and weave, I'll say, through whatever, and Brooklyn, Bronx, wherever, or wherever through. But you get coming across that bridge and into Manhattan, it's the bridge is closed and it's dead. If you've done it, it's dead quiet. There's nothing. And then you make that little, when I say loopy-loo, you come down that ramp, and then you have a million spectators in Manhattan. It is just a wall of sound, and like you said, it's so hard to not get your heart rate to skyrocket and sprint and feel like a hero. But there's never a point in that race. But for the most part, the Marine Corps Marathon as well is, very, like you're saying, I'm going to say congested. There's always people around,
Right.
So I do have those experiences, although it much farther back than you. You were home and showered by the time, but I was probably even at mile 3. So you had already ate all the bagels that I was hoping.
Yes, I took them all.
So. Oh, that's awesome. Well, hey, it's about an hour. A good time to, I think, wrap it up. I really just want to appreciate how kind you are and your time and going through all this. Any words of advice or wisdom? Like I said, we try to be all inclusive. We have some faster folk. We have some slower folk. With some people that look at it and say, I ain't ever going to run. But, any words of wisdom or advice for anyone out there?
I think the biggest thing across the board is just finding a way to be consistent. And that's if you are following a schedule and you have a day where it's there's not going to be a way I can get this whole thing in, find a way to get at least some of it in. Just a little bit is always going to be better than nothing. And that consistency from day to day, week to week, month to month, year to year is probably the biggest trait of any successful runner that I've ever coached, I've ever been a teammate with or been a part of, and that's when I've had my biggest successes. Wasn't that I was just crushing these monster workouts or anything. It was just I was able to be consistent day in and day out for really long periods of time. And that's when I saw the most improvement. And I think whether you're a new beginner or you're a runner trying to make a big jump, just realize that it's gonna be tough. There's gonna be a lot of discomfort early on, and if you can just get past that first few weeks to several weeks of some ups and downs of some workouts going well and some not going so well, if you can get through that, you really set yourself up for success down the road. And again, I think that's across the board, whether you're a beginner or somebody, even like I get a lot of people who have run 10Ks and stuff, and they want to jump up to the marathon, and they get into it and they're like, wow, this wasn't anything that I thought it was. But if you can just find a way to stay with it and be consistent with it, you're gonna be successful. I think that's I see that so many times with people. Like they have these people around them that they naturally probably better than them, more talent than them, just better natural ability, but they can't train consistently for any time at all. And you'll see those people who are kind of like, man, I wish I had that talent, but they have the ability to stay consistent. And the biggest thing you can be in, and just recognizing and educating yourself on the differences of why, like if a schedule says easy, and if you have a coach, perfect question to ask them, or you have resources like the book or whatever, find out and really believe in what you're doing. So like my program could be great, but if you don't believe in it, it wouldn't matter if it's the best plan in the world because you don't believe in it, So find something you believe in and find something that you can get behind and follow that and just put your trust into that, and then educate yourself as to why you're doing what you're doing. And that will take care of a lot of self-inflicted overuse injuries and sickness and things like that.
Awesome. Perfect little soundbite there to end on. Hey, I just want to thank you once again so much. Everyone, this was Luke Humphrey, author of the Hansons Marathon Method, and they are in Detroit, not Chicago, as I've been saying now for the last 10 years. You can check them out online, hansonscoachingservices.com, or just pop on out there and see him, because I'm sure he'd love to have people flood in and see him in the store, right?
Well, I'm not in the store, so you can go there anytime you want. I have a office in Rochester Hills, which is where the elite team is based out of, and so actually my wife I have about a 200 square foot office, and she has about 2,000 square feet of gym space. So we have a little thing going out here with it. So yeah,
a little thing, 2,000 feet, a little thing. Okay.
Yeah, it's nice. Yeah. It's actually really nice. We've got a nice garage door in the back. We can pop up and put the barbecue out there in the summer. We got the Clinton River Trail right down the hill, so it's perfect for me.
That sounds like my kind of training. Come on in and have some ribs off the grill. Well, hey, thank you so much, Luke. Appreciate your time. Everyone, head on out and check them out.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you very much.
Thanks for listening to the Endurance for Everyone podcast. If you have comments or questions for the show, send an email to teamE4E at enduranceforeveryone.com. And remember, swim calm, bike strong, and run steady.